Hi everyone, today I'm going to read you chapter 10 of my book, Wildmoore, Wrath of Zane. Hope you enjoy. Chapter 10, The Court of the Species. Natalie wasn't sure what happened after blacking out, but she then began to dream. However, instead of the dreams where it involved talking animals like many times before, it was of her Aunt Mari. Her aunt is in her wheelchair, and it was parked near the house phone. She had a worried look on her face. In the dream, Natalie still hadn't come home after her trip from the bookstore, and was waiting to get a call from either the police or Kyle, either one of them saying that they had found her niece. Mari then whispered to herself, "Dear Artrio, please let my niece find her way back home, okay?" That was when Natalie had decided to wake up. This time, she was lying on a soft bed, and although her vision was very blurry, she could nearly see that everything looked as though she was inside a castle. Before she could understand more about what had just happened, a small voice peeped. "Natalie?" Natalie looked over to see a familiar wolf pup running towards her bed. It leapt onto her lap as he happily whimpered to her. It was Barlow. "Barlow," Natalie said, gently embracing the wolf pup in her arms, although she couldn't clearly see his little face. She could feel his soft fur. "Barlow, what happened?" Natalie asked. "Zane captured all of the forest warriors and knights, as well as my father and the other wolves. Thomas was able to save you from Zane, and both Tristan and Forthwind were able to bring you here in the kingdom to heal you," Barlow hurriedly explained. Confused, Natalie said, Whoa, slow down, Barlow. What do you mean heal me?" "You have a horrible injury on your forehead. Your nose is nearly broken, and your eye is bruised. Unfortunately, your glasses were broken from your fight against Zane, so the Queen insisted on fixing them herself," Barlow explained. Then another thought occurred to Natalie, so she asked, "Thomas, where is he?" "He was at a cabin deep in the forest, but I was able to sneak out of there so I can check on you. I was so worried you wouldn't make it after what had happened." Barlow's sentence was cut off by a whimper, and he buried his head in the girl's lap. "Hey, I'm fine, buddy. I'm okay," Natalie assured him, but Barlow was still crying out of worry and fear, worse than what it was last time. Natalie knew a story wasn't going to cheer up Barlow this time, so she thought of a different tactic: sing the lullaby. Natalie began to softly sing to Barlow. "The roar of the lion, the wind of the owl's wing, courage and love will be your most cherished thing. Listen closely to the voice of your spirit, because with only a softest whisper, you will be able to hear it. With wonder of land that is beyond our tree, one day you will be who you are truly meant to be." Little by little, Barlow relaxed and fell asleep in her lap. Natalie felt relieved to see Barlow after the intense ordeal he had endured. However, She didn't understand why Zane was so hell-bent on destroying her, and how he felt so sure that he knew her family. Natalie thought he was only saying this to get into her head, or, better yet, agitate her to get a reaction. Her thoughts were interrupted when a voice said in a softening tone, "I haven't heard that song in years." Natalie looked up to see Thomas at the doorway. The 13-year-old carefully crawled out of bed and gently set Barlow aside before her feet touched the floor. Natalie then realized that she wasn't wearing her normal clothes. Instead, she was wearing a light green gown with long laced sleeves, and the gown portion of the dress has soft feathers sewn together. She recovered from the initial shock of her unusual wardrobe change, and walked over to Thomas as she asked, "I take it you're here because of Barlow?" "Initially, yes. But after hearing you sing to him with that lullaby, I realized it was best not to disturb him." "He has grown quite fond of you," Thomas said. Natalie looked at him confused and explained, "How could you possibly know about that song?" "My aunt had been singing that lullaby to me when I was 2 years old, because I used to have terrible nightmares about losing my mother." Thomas sighed with a heavy heart, knowing what he was about to explain would be hard for Natalie to understand. So he replied, That lullaby you were singing to Barlow has been around since the beginning of our world's time. Each lyric is a symbol of what our world stands for, and it serves as a soothing song for anyone, from youth to elder." Natalie looked at him in disbelief and said, not wanting to believe this, "No, you're lying." "Natalie, I am many things throughout my years, but a liar isn't one of them," and Thomas gently assured her, and then explained. "I was just a young man when I met this glorious woman, a fierce forest warrior, and so is her dear younger sister, who I'm always considered as a friend. Before Zane and his men attacked our land, the woman and I were happily married, and were expecting a child together. A few days before our child was born, we were paid a visit by Leofric, one of the polar bears from Fortune Cave, who foresaw the legacy. A legacy that said our child was destined to stop Zane and his men. Of course, we thought it was rubbish because he hadn't planned an attack for years. However, when our daughter was born, the prophecy was beginning to ring true when Zane and his men attacked not just Forest Grove, but every single section of land throughout Wildmoore. Innocent people were slaughtered, animals skinned and murdered, and even the plant life was on the verge of dying once Zane and his men attacked. Finally, I took my wife, daughter, and sister-in-law to a cave that I was able to conjure up with an earth crystal to create a cave leading to human earth. Sadly, the cave can only take 3 people to human earth, so unfortunately, I wasn't able to come with them, leaving me broken-hearted and alone in this world. Natalie stared at him with a suspicious and nervous glance before she stuttered, starting to get a little scared. "Thomas, what were you trying to tell me?" Knowing how this is going to end, Thomas finally said, Natalie, that girl is you. And both your mother and your aunt are from this world. They used to be forest warriors before they left this world with you to be in human earth to keep you safe. You were the one destined to stop Zane and his men. Natalie froze in shock after hearing this. Every thought in her head was spinning to more than one direction. Natalie finally collected herself and said, "No, this isn't true." Thomas walked up to her so he could calm her down, but Natalie stepped back, looking at Thomas like a stranger. Thomas then tried to say, "Natalie, everything I said to you is no lie. I have regretted every single moment that I haven't gone with you and your mother, but my duty is here." So the cave I was hiding in back at my world. "That was all you?" Natalie asked, now feeling visibly hurt. Thomas solemnly nodded and reached underneath his armor to pull out a crystal pendant nearly similar to hers. But the crystal was a grayish green color, and it was held by a bronze chain. He then explained once more. "I would often use this crystal to conjure up the control of creating rock from the ground up. After 13 years since their last attack, I had a sense that they would attack us again. So I used the crystal again to create the same cave that brought you, your mother, and your aunt to human Earth. I debated whether or not it would work, but I was over the moon when it did." "So it was your intention to bring me here?" Natalie asked, her voice beginning to break. Thomas nodded again and said, "I am so sorry that you had to find out this way. But you needed to find out the truth about your heritage." "A heritage that my aunt kept secret from me?" Natalie shouted. Thomas was taken aback by her outburst, but remained calm, and he replied, "Do not blame your aunt. I'm sure she wanted to tell you the truth when you were older. But to be honest, I didn't think you would find out the truth this way, when you're here in this world on your own." Natalie's head was still reeling, and she paced for a brief second, trying to make sense of what she had just learned. But immediately stopped and asked, "But why me, of all people? You could have picked a different kid to help you stop those monsters from destroying this world. Someone more qualified to defeat Zane. It had to be you, my beloved daughter," Thomas tried to say. This made Natalie even more furious, and said, Don't you dare call me your daughter. Where were you when my mother died in that car accident? Where were you when my aunt ended up in that wheelchair for the rest of her life? When I sometimes ended up taking care of her instead of the latter, where were you?" Thomas has said, his tone still calm. "Like I said, Natalie, I was here." Natalie scoffed and said, "Of course you were. Because you cared more. You cared more about your duty as a forest knight than to be with your family in my world." Before Thomas could say anything else to hopefully make his daughter better understand the situation, an unfamiliar voice said, "That cannot be true, young lady." The two looked over to see King Ulrich walk into the room. He wore a dark purple robe, a crown made of copper and broken pieces of bark from fallen trees. And on his left hand, he wore a copper rose ring with an emerald green crystal at the center. Natalie quickly composed herself from her angered outburst and was about to bow to the king to show her respect. But King Ulrich immediately said with a smile, "There is no need for that. Everyone, with the exception of the dark warlocks, is welcomed in the kingdom, in the Wildmoore kingdom." Natalie stood upright after hearing this. Normally, from the stories she read growing up, Natalie thought kings or queens wouldn't allow people like her or any other person in their kingdoms. So what she had just said to her genuinely surprised her. King Ulrich turned to Thomas and said, "Thomas, leave us alone, please. I have to take Natalie to meet the queen." Natalie then asked, suddenly remembering something, "But what about Barlow?" "After you sang him the lullaby, he will be all right for now. Come," King Ulrich replied, gesturing for Natalie to follow him. Naturally, Natalie was hesitant to leave Barlow alone, but King Ulrich seemed like a trusting man. So Natalie did follow him out of her recovery room. Once they left, they reached the lobby, where there was a staircase made of planks of elk wood, branches woven into railings. And on the stairs was a lovely carpet made from grass and blooming bright marigolds. On the walls were paintings of kings and queens from previous years. And on the frames that were also made from woven branches were the crystal pendants they had worn. King Ulrich noticed Natalie's drawn attention towards the paintings and explained, "These were the rulers of Wildmoore before myself and my wife. Each of them had its own special crystal pendant containing a special power. And they are hung along with these paintings until a new generation took possession of it. Your light crystal pendant is one of them." Suddenly, Natalie remembered that her necklace was ripped off after her face-off with Zane and began to panic. King Ulrich quickly placed a hand on her shoulder to calm her down and replied, "It's all right. Your necklace is in our possession along with your glasses to be mended." Natalie let out a relieved sigh, glad to hear that her precious item from her mother was safe. Then she replied, "Sir, about what I said to Thomas back there. Oh, I understand why you would be so upset after finding out the truth so soon. If it were me, I would be angry as well," King Ulrich said, and then added, But everything Thomas had told you is all true, young one. Whether you approve or not, you are destined to stop Zane and his men. But still, sir, I don't think I'm ready for something like this. I'm just a kid from human Earth, a normal, non-special kid," Natalie said, slightly mirroring what Laurel had repeatedly called her. King Ulrich looked at the girl with a soft gaze. Never in his lifetime had he seen someone looked defeated, and the war wasn't even over yet. However, he wasn't the only one who heard this saddening statement. I highly doubt it to be true. A voice sighed, causing Natalie and King Ulrich to turn to the staircase to see Queen Harley carefully walking down the stairs. Queen Harley's hair was fixed into a long side braid, and she wore a beautiful cream dress with laced sleeves, nearly similar to Natalie's dress, just in a sorted color. Natalie was stunned by the beauty of this queen, but she wasn't a stranger to this type of royalty because she had read about it all the time. Queen Harley finally approached her husband, Natalie, with both Natalie's glasses and pendant in hand. Queen Harley gently placed Natalie's glasses back on her face, restoring Natalie's vision. Queen Harley looked at the girl's face meticulously, and a small smile had appeared on her face before she replied, "You look just like your mother." Natalie was taken aback by this response. You know my mother?" Natalie asked, surprised. She and I were childhood friends. Ulrich, now that Natalie is healed, it is time that we take her into the castle's courtroom because the Court of Species requested a meeting regarding the oncoming war Zane has started. Queen Harley said to her husband, who gave her a nod. Natalie looked at the queen with a confused gaze and repeated, "Court of Species?" It is when the community of species are gathered from their realms to discuss serious topics concerning our worries of what Zane had caused. Oddly enough, Asher was the one requesting the meeting to talk about you and Tristan, Queen Harley said to the girl. Natalie then became worried, not for herself, but for Tristan, and also for Fourthwind, because they were the ones who brought her here. So she was more worried about their fate than her own. "Come, we cannot be late," Queen Harley said, and King Ulrich, and Natalie all walked into another room with a sign made of oak wood and painted in beautiful golden letters, Wildmoore Courtroom. Underneath the sign is a smaller sign that says, in silver letters, "Meeting in Session." Queen Harley opened the door, and Natalie was stunned by the courtroom, not because it was as grand as the castle lobby, but the variation of animals that were gathered in their seats. Natalie recognized a few creatures that were present in the courtroom. Cassius, the orangutan from Forest Grove, and Asher from the Lion Realm. Others were all new to her. There were two more guardian dragons. One was blue-green and the other purple. The owls she had seen when she first arrived. A large snow-white polar bear, and a small red panda wearing a little leaf sash. Fourthwind and Tristan were present as well, and they both rushed over to Natalie as they were relieved to see her on her feet. Natalie embraced her two furry friends, relieved to see them alive. Fourthwind pulled away from his human counterpart and said, "Thank goodness you're all right, Natalie. We tried to explain to the court beforehand, but they were adamant that the meeting needs to start when you were here." Queen Harley then announced, "And none of us are waiting a second more. Without further ado, I would like to call the Court of Species in session." Queen Harley then got to the podium and tapped the gavel, officially starting the court before she turned to Asher and asked, "Asher, would you care to share why you gathered the court today?" The elder lion nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. I have gathered all of you here to vote to lock this wretched girl away for brainwashing my son into leaving my realm." Stunned by the accusation, Natalie tried to say, "Now hold on just a second." Asher intensely turned to Natalie and roared, "You do not speak while I'm speaking the truth, you villainous mundane." You must have manipulated my son into going along in a deadly war. A war that Zane had caused. And for all I know, you are in league with those horrible men. Queen Harley tapped the gavel again, this time a little harder, causing Zane and Natalie to fall silent. You called this meeting because you wanted this girl arrested for recruiting your son to help her stop Zane and his men? Queen Harley repeated. Asher nodded and said, "Yes, Your Majesty, as this girl has no business being here in the first place." Tristan approached and asked, "If I may, Your Majesty?" Queen Harley gave him a nod, approving for the young lion to speak. Tristan turned to his father and said, "Father, Natalie of Human Earth did not manipulate me into joining her army. I joined her army at my free will. It is my choice to fight alongside her, rather than stay in our realm and wait to die." "Son, do not defend this humdrum," Asher tried to say. "I am not done speaking, Father," Tristan snapped back. Tristan then turned back to face Queen Harley and continued, "Your Majesty, I know I have only known Natalie since yesterday, but I can see this girl's spirit is fierce, genuine, and compassionate. The last time I have ever seen such a spirit is the forest warrior that came before her. That was when Natalie slowly walked up and finally spoke. So it's true then? My mother and aunt, Grace and Mari Vero, they're both forest warriors?" The court, including Asher, grew silent. However, the silence in Asher was short-lived, and he shouted, "Your Majesty, this is a trick, don't you see? Hey, you need to throw her into your dungeon right this, and that's enough, Asher. Your son, like he said himself, has gone to join Natalie and her army at his own free will. And from what he told me beforehand, Natalie told him that he could go back to his realm because she doesn't want him to get into trouble. But he chose to stand by her anyway because he's true to his word. A lesson I hope you will learn from your son," Queen Harley said with an authoritative tone. "And if you don't want to be exiled from the court, I suggest we should all answer whatever questions this girl has," King Ulrich announced. Finally, the bitter lion fell quiet. Natalie then asked, "Is it true my mother and aunt are forest warriors from this world? Because if it's all some kind of joke, I can't take any more lies." "A young lady," Leofric said with a booming voice. Natalie turned to face the large polar bear, who slowly approached her. Leofric then explained, "Your heritage to this world is anything but a lie. Everything Thomas had explained to you is true." It was Beatrice's turn to speak when she said, "When I was flying as part of my patrol around the land, I saw you arrive in this world 3 days ago. And although it was from an actual bird's eye view, I recognize those eyes anywhere, because that is how the child I was born 13 years ago was like. 2 beautifully different colored eyes." Suddenly, Dottie spoke up. "And I saw you rescue your guardian dragon from one of those dark warlocks back in Forest Grove, before I came here to inform your majesties here." The 2 guardian dragons were stunned to hear this. King Ulrich, noticing their stunned reactions, asks them, Tybalt, Thea, would either of you care to share your thoughts? Tybalt, the blue-green dragon, walked to the center of the room. Tybalt was about the same size as Fourth Wind, but with soft blue-green fur, dark green spikes on his back, sapphire blue eyes, dark green wings to match the spikes on his back, a light green tip at the end of his long tail, and had a white arrowhead mark on his neck. Tybalt looked down to face Natalie and asked, You were the one who saved my brother? Natalie nodded, simply answering the dragon's question. My sister and I were worried sick about Fourth Wind's well-being after he left Dragon's Pass. We have been hiding for many years since the attack. And we noticed Fourth Wind had left our land's boundaries. We were afraid he had been butchered, Tybalt said, his tone worried. Confused, Natalie turned to Fourth Wind and asked, Wait, you left your home knowing those men might kill you? Why didn't you just go back? Because much like Tristan, I cannot live in fear of those men. And I had missed traveling all over Wildmoore, whether I have a human counterpart or not. When Maurice had me under his net trap, I thought I had regretted it. And I wished I would have stayed, and then you showed up and saved my life, Fourth Wind explained. Then Thea, the purple dragon, was next to approach the girl. Thea was an exceptionally beautiful dragon, about half the size of her two brothers. Her fur was a lovely lavender purple, dark purple spikes on her back, stunning gold eyes, dark purple wings, a white tip at the end of her long tail, and finally, a white eight-pointed star on her neck. It is true. Tybalt and I have tried to warn Fourth Wind not to leave the pass, because of the danger that is still going on. And we were worried he had been captured by those dreadful men. But now I understood why. He was saved by his human counterpart, Thea explained. Natalie froze in her place, her mind reeling from all of this information that had been dumped on her. Too overwhelmed, Natalie bolted out of the courtroom and headed in whatever direction she could find in the castle. Everything Natalie had learned caused her to believe that everything in her life, who her family was, and where she came from, it was all a bold-faced lie. Why is this happening? All of this can't be true. This can't all be real, Natalie thought to herself as she ran further into the castle. She finally stopped in her tracks in the middle of the castle's grand hall, causing the girl to drop on her knees. She couldn't hold in the tears anymore. They began to flood straight out of her eyes from the truth she had endured. At the Shadowy Rock Palace, of all the rooms that could have been meeker and more sinister, the palace's dungeon would fit the description best. The dungeon cells were small, with cold black bars. The smell inside was moldy and terrible. Rotting skulls scattered all over the floor, and rats scurried all over the decrepit floor. Inside the only 4 cells of the dungeon were the forest warriors, including Madeline and Amelia. and the forest knights, including Ackerley, and lastly, the wolves, including Rolf and Rhea. Maurice walked into the dungeon to check on the imprisoned army and said, "All of you get comfortable. Once the girl meets her demise, Zane will finally rid the world of such terrible animals and beings." Ackerley looked at Maurice and said, "You will not win this war, Maurice." "Oh, but we will. And there's nothing that you or that mundane girl can do to stop us." Maurice said before walking out of the dungeon. Everyone slept in their cells, and for the first time, they all felt hopeless. Ackerley, however, tried to be optimistic when he turned to Madeline in the cell, in the next cell over, and playfully tried to say, "Do you remember when we were young, and we used to play practical jokes on the baker back in Paulwood Village?" Madeline grumbled, not making eye contact. "We were foolish children back then." Ackerley didn't give up and continued. "Well, we would often throw some leftover flour at the baker, causing his face to be covered. And we would both run before we would get caught by our families. We went into the forest and hid near Otter Falls. It was actually the day I fell in love with you, because of your mesmerizing gaze towards the waterfalls. You say that there's nothing more relaxing than hearing the waterfall flow." Madeline finished, her hopeless anger soon softening into affection. "You remembered that?" Madeline asked. "Of course I remembered, Madeline. I understood that you ended our love because of what happened to your parents years ago. And believe me, my own family is dead from the attack too. But my family wanted me to move forward and, more importantly, live my life with you," Ackerley said, his eyes staring deep into Madeline's. Madeline felt her heart swell into a familiar feeling of ardor towards Ackerley, a feeling she hadn't felt for a long time. She reached her hand out towards him, and Ackerley gently grabbed her hand with his. Amelia noticed her sister's loving exchange with Ackerley, and inside, she felt happy that her sister was beginning to open up again. But outside, however, she felt scared that Zane might be able to win the war he had caused all those years ago. Suddenly, a nearby squeak sounded on the floor outside of the forest warrior's cell. Curious, Amelia got up from where she was sitting, so she could hear the sound a little better. Aside from the squeak, she also heard a slight clinking noise. To her astonishment, it was a brown rat, and in its mouth was holding a dungeon key, the same key Maurice had moments ago. The rat scurried up to Amelia with the key in his mouth, and dropped it within her reach. The rat managed to squeak, "You must be free to help the girl fight Zane. I wish you all had the best of luck." Amelia smiled at the rodent and said, "Thank you, my friend." Sparking their hope once more, Amelia unlocked herself, Madeline, and the other warriors before proceeding to the knights and wolves. Rolf looked over to the rat and gave him a respected nod. The rat nodded back and scurried away once more. Amelia turned to the warriors, knights, and wolves before whispering to them, Alright, everyone. Let's find a way out of this horrid place. And find Natalie, Forthwind, Tristan, Thomas, and Barlow. So we can all regroup and end this once and for all. Rhea nodded in agreement and said, yes, let's finally do so. Okay, everyone, that's the end of chapter 10. Please stay tuned for chapter 11. Bye!